Welcome, everyone. We'll let everyone join in shortly. I see you all connecting. Welcome all so much for joining us today from all over Asia and Europe for this webinar on Futures Thinking Tools in partnership with the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies and the Development Academy of the Philippines. My name is Freya Chalpool and I lead the youth projects here at the Asia Europe Foundation. And today I have the pleasure of guiding us through today's session. Feel free to pop your names and LinkedIn's and where you're joining us from in the chat so we can see, and I will go through today's agenda. We have an hour and a half session. I will begin with a short introduction to the context of this session before handing over to our two keynote speakers today, Mr. Carsten Beck and Ms. Sheila R. Castillo. This will be followed by a Q&A and dialogue with both Carsten and Sheila, who are ready to share their insights and perspective on the core tools used in futures thinking and share perspectives from both Asia and Europe. For the Q&A session, you will all have the opportunity to share your thoughts and ask questions. For this purpose, you can use the Q&A function on your Zoom panel, where you can pose your questions, of course, upvote any that you find interesting, or even reply to them and engage in a discussion. So without further ado, we can get started. Firstly, the context of this session. As many of you know, ASEF is an intergovernmental organization where we work here to strengthen mutual understanding between Asia and Europe. Across different thematic areas, we bring together a variety of governmental and civil society stakeholders to further strengthen the connectivity and opportunities for collaboration to solve global challenges between the regions. And one of our flagship projects is the ASEF Young Leaders Summit. And this is a leadership development program for young leaders across Asia and Europe to learn, exchange, and connect with one another. This session today is part of the ASEFYLS Capacity Trainings 2026, for which we have a number of selected young leaders, but we are also very happy to be able to open up today's session to more young leaders. So I'm happy to see many of you joining us here today. And this topic of all these webinar series and the focus of ASEFYLS this year of anticipatory leadership for a human-centered future, it's a brand new topic for us here at ASEF, and it focuses on how we can prepare young people for the kind of leadership that is needed for a more human-centered society, and who can use future-oriented tools to guide present-day decisions. So today's session aims to give you food for thought and inspiration that we hope you will take beyond the session for deeper discussions with your peers. And throughout this webinar series, where this is the third session now, we of course been bringing together a group of expert speakers from different backgrounds to share with you their insights. So we started out with an introduction to anticipatory leadership mindsets. We've had one session on systems thinking, and then today's session on tools. So we hope you're enjoying this series overall. With that, I think we're ready for the first segment of the session. So for the first keynote presentation, we welcome Mr. Carsten Beck. Carsten is a director and futurist at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. He's a leading expert in trend analysis and scenario planning with over 30 years of experience working across more than 30 countries. He's delivered over 1,000 presentations on this topic, helping organizations from governments to global companies understand how emerging trends shape the future. And at the Institute, he leads presentations and keynotes focusing on how to turn insights into practical strategies for future readiness. He also has a master's in political economy from the University of Copenhagen. So thank you very much for joining us today, Carsten. We look forward to hearing your presentation, and I will stop sharing and say that the floor is now yours.
Thank you. Let me just see if I can share my screen here. Before we get started, can you see a turkey, all of you?
We can indeed. Thanks, Carsten.
No. Let's start with the logo. And thank you so much, Freya. It's an absolute pleasure, both personally and also on behalf of CIFS, to be part of this program. When we talked about the program and started to sort of formulate the first thoughts, we were super excited and super happy because we do actually see this anticipatory part of future leadership as extremely important. Actually, just to start with a small story, I was yesterday in a meeting with one of the key advisors to the Danish Minister of Finance, and we were discussing, me being an economist as well, discussing what is actually the tools of the future. And Thomas, the advisor to the minister, he said, well, but the only thing right now we talk about is uncertainty. And that is, of course, leading up to what we are going to discuss here today, because the key parameter of anticipatory leadership and foresight is, of course, to have these dialogues about uncertainty. Now, I know you have had a number of sessions already in this program, and Freya talked about them. But just to sort of clarify, and I know you know this, and I've seen this before, but we still get this sense of frustration when we talk to clients and partners around the world, because we continue to say, and we've said this for 50 plus years, that foresight is obviously not about predicting the future. Actually, when CIFS started back in the late 60s, I do think the model-based approach to forecasting and future studies, as we called it back then, was more in vogue. But obviously, in all our countries, in all of Asia, in all of Europe, and indeed all of the world, we do know that today in the markets and societies we see in 2026, it is about learning and opening up to possibilities of change. Is that easy? I'll talk a little bit about that and some of the fallacies and the biases that we see. No, it's not easy, and one of the key things in foresight is actually this urgency of the future and for anticipatory leadership. When is the future actually urgent? And for most organizations, whether it's governments, NGOs, or private companies, there's always a big agenda on the short term. So actually pushing on behalf of the future, being an ambassador for the future, for me is the first tool, and it is actually the first step. I will share with you at the end of this presentation, I think I have 20 minutes each, an example from a big European bank where we did a full scenario process. And actually, I'm spilling the beans here right now. Actually, one of the key messages was that it helped to create an urgency about the future. So this awareness is absolutely the first step. So today I will not give you sort of a list of tools, but rather talk you through how we work with foresight at CIFS. Of course, mentioning some of the key stumbling blocks and key ways of thinking in regards to the future. And I know later in the program we will all be working with scenarios. So once again, I will not go into detail about what a good scenario looks like, but just stating right now that working with different scenarios, with different narratives and different scenarios is obviously at the core of what we do as foresight practitioners. So, super boring slide here. I thought I'd just bring you sort of how we work with the future at CIFS. So this is actually a process description of you could almost call it a generic process at CIFS. And as I said, we work for governments, we work for the UN, we work for private companies, we work for everybody, and across sectors, across cultures and nations. So it is very, very high level. So obviously, we have a scoping phase. I mean, the first thing to contemplate is obviously that one should not do foresight and use foresight experience and foresight tools without having a problem to solve. So there needs to be a reason why we do this. You need to get people on board, and as I said in the beginning, in the introduction, getting people on board is not super easy. So there's a little bit of a struggle going on there. I would, however, say if you start to use foresight methodologies and tools in your organization, one of my experiences is that the process itself, of course, it creates results and it's of value when you do strategy or innovation or risk assessments, but also just participating in the process, the sort of the learning you get from talking to your peers and colleagues and stakeholders about future narratives is energizing. It is often even fun. It creates new sort of what ifs and sort of wow experiences. So, I mean, sometimes, let's be honest, in your work, in all organizations, it's a little bit boring. Processor, you just need to do it, and that's how it is. But foresight is actually one of the processes where we always see a high level of engagement, energy, and involvement. So that's super positive. Then when you've done the scoping, and we will not do that today, obviously, you have an explore phase where you open up, and this is where you get insights. This is where you do market scans or other kinds of scans. You look for signals. You work with trends. We mainly work with mega trends at CIFS, but there's many trend hierarchies that might be of importance to your discussions. And here actually we see that you can see sort of the blue shape in the middle of the slide. We actually see the process opening up. This means that when you go out and explore a topic on behalf of your organization, it is important to have many different voices, many different kinds of data, both quant and qualitative, and really you are able to open up and involve a lot. Then the next stage is actually to focus a little bit more, and that is to say, okay, now we've looked at our topic and we've done some trend research. We have discovered some key takeaways that we need to consider in our strategy or whatever reason we have for doing foresight. But now we need to focus on the most important trends and uncertainties for our organization. So we need to discover what is the key topics and themes in the external world that will be of importance to our topic. And here you need to narrow the scope a little bit. You need to have fewer people. You can't have 200 people talking about what is the most important thing and how to decide on that. And when you have made that decision, you're actually ready to build scenarios. And in the build phase, once again, you can, just like in the explore phase, you can open up and you can have more people involved in creating the scenarios. And there's many different ways of creating scenarios. I'm sure we will get back to that later in the program. And then the final two steps is one, to understand the implications of the scenarios, and then to look for robust strategic options and recommendations, of course, related to the scope of the project. And obviously, here we will probably see a part of the process where there is fewer people involved, because in the end, we want to make better decisions about the future. We need to treasure the process, all of that, but we need to make decisions. And decisions are being made often in most organizations by a few select group of people, of course, often involving management, ministers, chief of departments, etc., etc. So a process where you can involve a lot, but you also need to be super mindful about when you need to be fewer voices in the room. So, with that said, let's look at how to go about it and some of the tools and tricks of foresight. First of all, I'm not sure if you have seen this. Yeah, you actually just saw it 10 minutes ago. But we really like what we call Taleb's Turkey here at CIFS. It is Nassim Taleb who wrote The Black Swan many years ago. Very big book, very good. Basically saying there'll be more surprises in the future. And he had this wonderful example of how turkeys do foresight. And in my experience, a lot of organizations are actually Turkeys, because here you have the perspective of the future from the sort of the mindset or the position of a Turkey. We have a KPI that is the Turkish well-being. It could be anything else. Uh, the turnover, profit, innovation, whatever kind of KPI you have. And as you can see, well, a turkey every day gets a little bit better. Everything is fine. You're out of the eggshell and you get food and you get water and there's other turkeys. Life is good. So you optimize and you become more efficient every day. Efficiency, of course, something that is very near to my heart as an economist. But if you don't have a parallel track, and that is one of the tools, having a parallel track within your organization saying, yeah, but we also need to consider what could be sort of the medium to the long-term horizon 2 and 3, basically, consequences of societal and market trends for our organization. And in the life of a Thanksgiving turkey, we all know how it ends. It ends pretty sad for the turkey. Because the turkey did not do foresight. And actually, as you can see in the top of this slide, I have written my country of Denmark is actually behaving like a turkey. I'm very happy to live in Denmark. There's a lot of positive things to say about Denmark. It's all good. But when you look to the public debate in Denmark, we need you young leaders, because we do not have a debate about the medium to long term in Denmark. In Danish politics, we just had an election this winter. In Danish politics, everything is about the short term. Everything is about what happens next year. Could we get another day off? How about the cost of living? How about the childcare institutions? And I am not suggesting that is not important. Of course it is. But it frustrates CIFS, and it probably frustrates the foresight community of Denmark, that we almost have zero discussions about the medium to long term. And that goes both for the normative perspective, what would we like for Denmark to become? And here we can disagree a lot, of course. There's different political opinions. But also simply to say, is the system sustainable? And sustainability in the broadest sense of the word. So that is really a dilemma. Another thing to consider, another tool, is actually how to orchestrate the discussions about the future. And here we see basically, and this is also based on my experience and the CIFS experience, we see two approaches to engaging in conversations about the future. One approach, and that is probably, to be honest, my approach, would be to say we need to look for data. We need to look for data, tools, techniques, models telling us what happens in the sphere of economics, politics, technology, norms and values, could be any kind of trend or key focus area. The only problem with that is that all data, almost all data, 99.9%, is about the past. So we are having a conversation about the future, and what I bring to the table is data about the past. Once again, I'm not suggesting that data is not important. Obviously, it is. We can go out and we can say, count the people of the Philippines or the Denmark today, and we can make some sort of prediction about what happens 5 years down the line with demographics. But it is also very obvious that techniques and data is not enough. So we need future thinking, we need creativity, we need imagination and speculation. Then you could say, but why bother with the data if it's all about the past, except demographics? Well, of course, there's some sort of almost laws of society that we need to consider. We can challenge everything, I do agree, but the sweet spot is in the middle. And the sweet spot is when you have these two approaches to the future, and these two voices being heard in the conversation about the future. So really aiming for a diversity of voices and inputs is very, very important. Another tool we use, and we use this often in the beginning of our processes, and once again, our processes is mainly scenario processes, could also be the Delphi analysis and the futures triangle, which I think you've seen already. But one of the key elements in the beginning of a scenario process is looking for the right questions. And in some processes, organizations or societies tend to forget that. Because I guess all of us attending this call, I would imagine most of us have educations and there's probably some PhDs sitting here in this call, and we are all super smart and super clever. The only problem with clever people, highly educated people, is that they've been taught to look for answers. You become an expert if you know the answer to something. And in foresight, we're actually saying, yeah, we know in the end we need better answers for our societies. As Freya said in the beginning, a human-centric future for all our countries. What does that actually mean? But if we don't know what kind of questions will be important in the future, we can't start looking for answers. So actually dedicating time, workshops, energy, collecting insights on what kind of questions are right. We see that as super, super important. Let me just share one thing from some of the stuff we do here in Europe and in Denmark. We have lots and lots of discussions about what does it mean to be a family. And I imagine if I say the word family to all of you today, and once again across our different cultures and nationalities, you would have a pretty good mental image of what is a family in your country. But going forward, at least in Denmark, I can tell you, we are not sure. We are not sure, and how will the household composition be, and what kind of network and what kind of relationships and trust will we see in family structures in the future? So that's one example of finding the right question, and then you can start looking for answers to create a better life for all these families, obviously. We see a lot of biases. I think maybe you've seen this slide before from my colleague Lasse. But what we often experience doing these processes is that there's a number of biases in the organization. The first one is actually very critical. That's sort of the status quo bias. And that is basically saying, and it says business, it could be society, it doesn't matter. It's basically saying change is bad. And we see that reaction mostly in organizations that are successful. So if you come from a historical background within your organization, could be a ministry, an NGO, a private company, and you've done good, you have delivered what you were supposed to deliver, then starting to address the concept of change is not easy because you are good at what you do already today. So this status quo bias often needs to be challenged. Then there's a bias related to, I would almost say, laziness. If you're a little bit in doubt and you don't really know what to do, just do what you always do. Do what you know. So if you're good at creating welfare solutions, let's just create more welfare solutions. If you're good at collecting what do I know, tax, let's collect some more tax. So for organizations that are falling, not are falling, but have fallen a little bit asleep, this is actually a bias we see a lot. Then the opposite side of the coin is sometimes we have ideas where people say they're so good they couldn't fail, so why do foresight? Our society, our city, our organization, we have this brilliant idea. It will change everything. Everything will be fine. And here, of course, it is super important to also look at negative and sort of critical scenarios and narratives. Then we have the expert problem. I already talked about that. The more expert you are, the more education you have, the more difficult it is to look for solutions or even questions outside your domain of expertise. So if you're looking around the room when you do scenarios and you see all these experts, and maybe they even have the same educational background, that is a critical thing that needs to be addressed. And then finally, and I guess we all experience that, groupthink. That happens all the time, and we need these dissenting voices. So watch out for these biases. Then my last 5 minutes, just one slide with some of the fallacies. We think foresight is a wonderful tool, and we see it actually. We see an explosion of interest. We also see this program that we're attending today. So there's a lot of interest in foresight, but of course there's also fallacies. Things can go wrong. The first thing that we see as a fallacy is if you only use linear thinking and linear projections, because the world is not always moving linear. And once again, I can make sort of fun of myself. I'm an economist. Economists, we like linear projections. And we are constantly surprised about the horrible wars of the world, and new technology popping up, and new political systems emerging, all of that. So make sure you are not only using a linear mindset and methodology. Then sometimes we see in processes that if you do foresight on behalf of your organization, you start to say, and you realize all the biases and all the fallacies, and you start to say, okay, we need to move. Sometimes organizations forget that everybody else is moving as well. So thinking about, say, competitors or technology or whatever could influence your future, make sure you have a conversation where they are moving as well. They are not staying still. And then finally, no, not finally, there's actually two more, sorry. Uh, Sometimes we see, and this is mainly for people my age and older. They do foresight. They know they have to do it. They're not super happy about it, and they have this thinking. Okay, now we do foresight, and then we will arrive to the future. We will have a scenario. We will have a strategy, whatever, and we have arrived. And obviously, I mean, it's so banal. This we all know there's no arrival in the future. It is an ongoing process. There will always be new challenges. There will always be change of insights and new scenarios emerging. Don't predict, don't plan. And this thing about being too optimistic, we had that as one of the biases as well. Now I'll just spend my last couple of minutes showing a few examples, actually two examples. The first one is the UN Pact for the Future. Actually, all of our countries, except maybe one or two, have signed a pact for the future saying that we need to strengthen the voices of the coming generations, future generations, in all our conversations. I think that is absolutely wonderful, and we see that as a very important tool because it gets traction, and we start to see an interest. And in Europe, we actually have a commissioner in the European Union looking for these intergenerational fairness perspectives. What he is looking at, and we have met with him a couple of times, is how to embed long-term thinking in policy making, how to make fair policy making, fair opportunities, and fair places for future generations. And then the critical one, amplifying the voices of young people today. And that is not easy. They have started. We are seeing some progress in Europe, but as I said in the beginning of my presentation, and I'm a little bit ashamed to say this, in Denmark, we are not very good at this. So we are starting to see traction. We are starting this journey, but we are really in phase one here in Europe. And then, Freya, can I have 2 more minutes?
Go
Yes,
for it.
you're smiling. Yes, very good. Uh, I will just share with you one example of a process that we did that we are allowed to share. The problem is we have NDAs on almost everything we do at CIFS. But we did a full-scale, full-blown scenario process for the Dutch International Bank called ING a couple of years ago, and we're allowed to share results. So basically, it's from 2018, and obviously the scope is future of financial services. It's a bank. And here you have the faces in the diagram. It is more or less the faces I showed you in the beginning of my presentation here today. Here you have to the left the four scenarios they were creating. As you can see, there were two uncertainties, and I think we will work with that later on in the program as well. One uncertainty about consumers and the other about technology. And what it helped ING to do is to prevent them from this linear thinking, highlighting potential blind spots, looking for challenges as well as opportunities. And then also they said they were actually happy to be exposed to scenarios that were not preferred by the bank. So difficult scenarios. Yeah, and here you have some details, not important. And my final slide, and here I've sort of marked it with red, that doing this project was actually their first step to sort of fight the future and foresight, fight for futures and foresight thinking, and get it to the board level. Because even at the board level, where they should be thinking about the future, it is still very, very short term. And of course, some of the key learnings, they did not talk about all the innovation, they kept that a secret, but one of the realizations was for the financial sector that they are faced with a more risky environment going forward, so they need to keep the scenarios alive. So this is some elements of a typical foresight process at CIFS. And I think I'll end there, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A session, and I'll leave the floor to you, Freya.
Thank you, Carsten. That was so interesting. I've heard bits of this before, but I always hear new things from you. But I think my favorite takeaways is really this thing about questions, asking good questions. So I'm very curious what will be put in the Q&A, as you're all, you're all experts, young leaders yourselves, but what questions will you put in? Are you asking the right ones? But also I think these future fallacies, these biases and things that we have I mean, while we're focusing a lot on giving tools, right, through this program and giving skills, but all of this is underpinned by your own leadership and the individual leadership mindsets that we want young people to have. So thank you very much, Carsten, for this presentation. And we will come back and bring you back in a little bit for the Q&A. But at this stage, let me invite our next speaker to join us. I'm going to invite Ms. Sheila Castillo to give her Q&A, but let me introduce her first. So, Ms. Sheila R. Castillo is an independent social development and foresight consultant with over 20 years of experience across the Philippines, Cambodia, and globally. She currently serves as Foresight and Engagement Director at United Edge and teaches foresight and futures thinking at the Development Academy of the Philippines. Sheila is an active member of the international foresight community, including the Association of Professional Futurists, and has contributed to several global advisory initiatives. She's deeply committed to advancing work on climate, environment, and liberation for all of which are things I think resonate very much with our young leaders here today. So thank you very much for joining us today, Sheila. We really look forward to hearing your presentation, and I will hand over the floor to you.
That introduction, Freya, and thank you, Carsten, for your very informative and very insightful talk. So let me share with you my presentation. It's gonna be 20 minutes, so I'll try my best and turn on my timer. So I wrote an article on foresight leadership, and when I was invited to do this talk, I said that this would be the perfect one to talk about it because you are focused on anticipatory leadership, and foresight leadership is really the prerequisite for anticipatory leadership. Of course, anticipatory leadership is on a higher level because that is focused on action, but foresight leadership is focused on using the tools of foresight to kind of craft a different world. So there are 10 skills which I think are really quite important for young leaders to develop this kind of leadership. It's not moving. There you go. So we all know that the world is changing really fast, and futurists are describing this in an alphabet soup of what do you call this? Acronyms. Some call it VUCA, some call it bunny, tuna, wrapped, and so on. Many different acronyms that describe how fast changing and volatile and chaotic and tangled our new world is, and even the future, of course, because that's more uncertain, and we are seeing glimpses of it right now. So it's really important to be able to nurture and develop skills that we could use in this fast changing world. So for me, as a person working on foresight in social development, I really encourage everyone to nurture their foresight leadership skills. Now, we are talking about tools, and there are so many tools in foresight, like hundreds and hundreds of tools in foresight. I haven't seen anything that captures all of them. The nearest I could find is Popper's Diamond. This is from Raphael Popper, and he's just showing here a few different foresight tools in the early 2000s. This is in the early 2000s because new tools are coming up every now and then. I myself have helped develop 3 foresight tools. So these tools are as you can see in the diamond, some of them are focused on creativity, evidence, expertise, and interaction. We won't have time to discuss all of these things, but I just want you to have an idea of how rich these resources are, no? And you can find all of these tools in journal articles, if you follow futurists, and if you join workshops on foresight, you will definitely have the opportunity to experience some of these tools. Okay, so for my talk, there are a few things that I would like to share with you. Of course, these foresight leadership skills can be developed in many ways. The focus of the sharing is using the foresight tools to develop these skills. So there are multiple tools that can be used to develop these skills. I'm only sharing at least 3 tools and explaining only one. Because, for example, for each of these skills, there are probably dozens of tools that you can use, and we don't have time for that. So I'm just giving you a really quick glimpse of what we have in terms of tools in foresight. And of course, these tools can be used in developing, different leadership skills. If you can use one to develop one skill, it doesn't limit you from developing others. And of course, these are also very useful when you use them together, when you just don't depend on one tool. So a combination of tools really helps us develop these skills and help us have a better understanding on how we can use a foresight. So the first skill or foresight leadership skill that I will share with you is scanning weak signals and trends. So there are several tools to develop this. I will focus on what we call the STEEP analysis, and it is looking at the technical, economic, ecological, political, and social aspects of an issue. You can also see this in different forms. Some people call this PESTLE, Steeple V. I myself use Inspect++, wherein the ++ is ethical and spiritual aspect. So there are so many dimensions of an issue that you can look at. And if you look at all of this, you will see what are the emerging issues, what are the weak signals, what are the trends that are coming up within the issue that you are looking on. This is really a very important practice as a futurist, and every leader should be doing the scanning in the issues that they are working in. And of course, second, imagining multiple futures. Sometimes it's difficult to have multiple futures in mind because just developing one vision is hard enough. But it is really important that we are able to imagine multiple futures because there are infinite futures possibilities. And for one thing that we want to happen, just one factor changed from that aspect, it could also change the future. So, of course, scenario development is a very important tool in imagining multiple futures. So, there are different types of scenario development tools. Some futurists use different archetypes. I always use the one that Suhail Inayatullah used and Jim Dater used, 4 scenarios, 4 different archetypes. And this just gives us 4 possibilities among the infinite possibilities of a certain issues. And these scenarios can be used in developing different paths to achieve, what we want to happen, what we really like to happen. Another tool is crafting longer-term visions. I have noticed that planners work on 3 to 5 year visions. We have to stretch that further into 10 years. Some futurists are even working on longer-term futures, such as 100-year future, like the Long Now Foundation. They're working on 500-year futures. And this is really important to really stretch our imagination and know that what we are working on today really has impacts and consequences in the future. So we really have to stretch it further. One of these tools that we can use is called aspirational scenarios. This is a normative type of tool wherein you already have what you want. You already have the vision that you want, and you try to figure out how do we reach that future. So you work on that aspirational scenario. And that is how you create a long-term vision. And of course, it's also really important to anticipate risks and challenges. This is a huge part of foresight. If we are just working on, the rainbows and roses of foresight, it is not very useful. So we really have to anticipate challenges. And one tool that will be very helpful for us is wind tunneling. And this is assessing our scenarios and strategies together. Of course, if you have 4 scenarios and you have 5 strategies, you test all of these 5 strategies against each of your scenarios and see, will this work or not? This is really important in seeing which strategies should we focus on, because we cannot possibly focus on all of the things that we want to do. We can prioritize and we can put these things into perspective and see, oh, this one works for this scenario and the other one does not. And of course, developing proactive strategies. Now, most of the problems that we are experiencing right now is because of what is called pathological short-termism. No? So we really have to pause. We really have to see how we can be more proactive in strategizing for the future. And one of the tools that we can use is called backcasting. And this is, I really enjoy using this tool because instead of planning from the present towards the future, you are working from the future achieved back to the present. And in this tool, you are creating strategies, you are developing policies, and you are, using different steps to achieve the future coming back to the present. So it's the other way around. This is really good because we are actually freeing the present. We are actually freeing the future from the baggages of the present. So we free our future, and that is, for me, is a really fun way of using foresight. And of course, we are also utilizing creativity and innovation. Somebody said, and I forgot, that if we are using the same kind of thinking to solve the problems that we are experiencing right now, there will be no change, or something to that effect. So therefore, we have to be creative and innovative in creating solutions for our present problems. And the tool that I chose here is creating future personas. Remember, I told you about the scenarios. When we create our scenarios, we can create the future personas in these scenarios. Who are the people living in this future? How are they living? How do their day look like? And what are they doing? And how do they feel? And what are the circumstances that they are living with? This is a great way to make a certain scenario really, really tangible. You feel it, you see it, you feel like you're almost there when you create these future personas, because you see how they live and what kind of life that they are living with in future personas. Really, really creative and fun way to imagine futures. And of course, as leaders, we have to embody resilience and adaptability. Without foresight, this is really, really very difficult. So as leaders, to be able to develop that, we need to use different tools that help us be more ready. And so in the humanitarian field, they have created what they call anticipatory action. They have created early warnings for all. They said that reacting to disasters is no longer enough. So we have to create ways how we can be more ready for whatever future disasters. But this is also very useful in other fields as well. This is not just limited to humanitarian work. So you can also use this. What will be your early warnings for the issues you're working on? What will be the tipping points, and what will be the trigger points that tell you, I need to do this thing and I need to do that thing? So this is a way to help us be more resilient and adaptable. Another skill that I think we should all be nurturing within us is leveraging participatory action and collaboration. And one of the tools that I really love using is an open space methodology. This is a way for people to really talk about how they see an issue. For example, you're dealing with one issue, but everyone can create a space for talking about different aspects of this issue. They can really ask different questions and invite others if they feel that and they are being called to listen to this discussion, then they will go there. But it's also very open because you can also join other groups as well. So open space technology is a way to really open the conversation and allowing people to initiate conversations on what they feel is important around an issue. And that I think is really very, very powerful because it gives us the initiative and leadership to open the space for that topic. And then, of course, as Carson mentioned, embracing complexity and uncertainty. And this is an aspect of foresight leadership that is often missing in other leadership models. It's leadership is not just knowing everything and being in control. It is also learning how to deal with whatever may come, complexity and uncertainty. And one tool that we can use is called adaptive pathways planning. So we can talk about what's happening, what matters most to us, what we can do about it, and how can we implement the strategy, and if it's working, and then readjust. This is not written in stone. You can always change and adjust based on the changing context, because our context is always changing. The change is happening really, really fast right now. So this is a very useful tool to use. And finally, last but not the least, is embedding justice from design to decisions. This for me is the most important, because why are we changing or working towards the future if the future is not going to be just, if the future is not going to be equitable? So this for me is the heart of foresight work as a justice worker. And I actually developed a tool for this called the North Star. And we have a model at United Edge. We call it the justice-based approach, which has 5 pillars: actions, systems, decisions, models, and accountability. So in the North Star, we ask, what are just actions in this future? What are no longer acceptable in this future? What are the artifacts that we see in this future? What are the systems working in this future? How are they different from current systems? What are the ways of engaging all stakeholders in decision making? How does that look like? And what are the models to make this future work and just? And then how do we ensure accountability in all of these aspects? This is the North Star that we designed at United Edge, that really kind of brings together at the end, all of the strategic foresight canvas, all of the different tools in strategic foresight, and we work on the North Star to ensure that the future that we are designing and working for in the present is really, really equitable. And for me, that's the most important thing. So leadership is very difficult. And it's more difficult and more complex right now that we are being bombarded from all fronts with changes in technology, geopolitical issues, social issues, and everything that we have to contend with when we are working with the youth, when we are working with marginalized sectors. It's quite difficult, but it really helps if we have the tools that we are developing. We have the tools that we are practicing to develop our foresight leadership skills. These are all really useful, and we can use all of them in combination so that we are able to serve our constituents better, our communities better, and so we are really looking at what we want to achieve from the lens of foresight, from the lens of justice. And for me, once we start to recognize the importance of these foresight leadership skills, it really helps us have a very clear lens on how we can, act out our leadership and how we can be the good leaders that we want to be. So these are all skills that can be developed. This can be nurtured. And I encourage you all to learn more about foresight and start practicing, because foresight is about practice. All of these tools need to be practiced. It doesn't come like in automatically. And the more we practice the tools of foresight, the more we develop our foresight leadership skills. So as Carson mentioned, it's not about prediction. It's not about being in control of what might happen, but it's really being able to respond and think ahead when the world is changing fast. This is the anticipatory capacity, so that we can, think of multiple alternative futures and work towards a long-term just futures for all. So thank you very much, and let us connect.
Thank you so much, Sheila. What an insightful presentation. And I'm so I think this point of, there's so many tools out there that can be used, but also that, find one pinpoint to start, and all of it is interconnected with the leadership skills and the mindset that we're trying to deliver, right? In our work and in our days. And I think this focus point on justice and the related relation of this to what does it mean to have human-centered futures and to be people-focused is so important. Okay. With that, I'm going to bring back Carsten and add you into the discussion here. Hi, Carsten. And move on to the dialogue and Q&A segment of today's session. So we have a lot of Q&A questions already coming in, but a reminder that you can still ask questions to Carsten and Sheila in the Q&A function. But I will start with a couple of openers from me. So I want to start with a question on, we've covered a lot of tools, different methodologies that are possible to use, but sometimes they can feel a little bit abstract in learning about them to then be able to apply them. And we will have a full session next week on the application of futures thinking. But I wanted to ask perhaps if each of you have a concrete example of where a tool or these tools that you've covered has directly shaped a decision or a strategy that you've seen in your work. But either of you would like to start with this. Sheila?
Should I start?
Yeah, go for
Karsten?
it.
Yeah, please start.
Okay, so in the certificate course at the Development Academy of the Philippines, one of their capstone project is actually a policy brief. So they develop a policy brief on the issue that they're working on, and the tool that I've seen that's really really useful for them when crafting their policy recommendations is backcasting. Of course, before they come to backcasting, they really work on a whole set of tools as well. But in backcasting, they really see what are the strategies that would really be helpful. And then they get their policy recommendations from there. I think backcasting is really useful. It's also quite fun to work with.
Thank you, Sheila. Carsten.
Yeah, from my side, maybe a couple actually. One is a project we did for a Danish union. We were heavily unionized in Denmark, lots of unions. And the thing is, if unions continue to do what they do today in Denmark, they will simply go like the turkey because young people are not prepared to spend the money. So we actually had a project. We are not very much focused on the normative perspectives, but of course here it was about solidarity. It was about what kind of networks and what kind of support will you have in work life in the future, and just to have these. We did the 2x2. We do that 90% of the time. Scenario space, just to have these very very. I would almost say extreme scenarios actually moved this union quite a bit. And one of the key results was, okay, maybe the service element of a union, sort of how can we be of service to the members in reference to education, career development, all of that. That was actually amplified by some of the scenarios. And doing backcasting, I think actually we did that as well. So just being exposed to these, and extreme is maybe the wrong word, but four narratives, and you go, okay, maybe there's one that's sort of straight ahead and linear, but then the three others will sort of push you. That is so worthwhile.
I'm going to follow up with a question from the Q&A from Kania Tresna Rahayu, who asks, which futures thinking tool would you recommend learning first to be able to start applying in real projects? And do you think backcasting is the right place to start, or are there other tools that are the easiest place to start? Sheila, would you like to go first?
Definitely don't start with backcasting.
Okay.
So in the foresight process, that comes last. But I think the first thing that we really have to start learning and practicing is scanning. Choose a framework, a scanning framework that works for you. What are the dimensions that you need to look at? Is it steep? Is it pestle? Or they're almost the same, actually. Like, choose your framework and then use it to organize your scanning. And this is a practice. This is not something you can do one time, big time, and done. No, this is something that you have to continue doing, because this is the lifeblood of foresight work. Things are always changing. So for us to know what's emerging, what are the trends, and what are the weak signals, we really have to practice scanning. So if your issue is youth futures, look at what's going on around that. So use scanning for me is the very first thing that we need to learn.
Yeah. Carsten, in agreement there? Oh, you're on mute at the moment.
Yeah, sorry. I'm super boring here because I fully agree that would be the first step. And whether it's a PISTEL or STEEP or any other acronym, but here at CIFS, we are just rewriting our megatrend slide decks. And we actually have huge discussions. Can you talk about megatrends, because everything is changing so fast? But I fully agree, Sheila. Just to have, of course, the topic at hand, and then to sort of explore and remembering the thing about the questions. Just give you one example. In not all the countries present in this call, but in many of our countries, we will see an aging going forward. It's the most boring trend of all, because we all know about it. And yet, I would still say, in most of our countries, we have not had a discussion on what does it mean to live in an old society. It's one thing that the economic system will break down, and labor force participate, all of that. You know the drill, eh? But what does it truly mean for Japan, for China, for Italy, Denmark, to live in an old society? What is the perspective of our leaders? And now we have all the young leaders here in this program, but just starting to have these conversations, and then actually maybe even before we get to the scanning, setting aside time to do this, looking each other in the eyes and say, the 4 of us will do this, or the 10 of us will do this, and we will have a program for this, because it's never urgent.
I'm going to follow up with a question. I know I set questions, but I've spotted questions in the Q&A that I think are really, really good to follow up from this. So there's a question on from Kang E. Yualthant, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, which is, how can organizations foster alignment on foresight among team members with different generational perspectives and varying levels of futures literacy, technological digital literacy, and awareness, I guess, of those megatrends that are coming through as well. And so how do you persuade people, I guess, to make that time to sit down and do it? And how do you get people on board? What are your experiences with this?
I can tell you a story. The
Yeah.
most difficult thing I ever had to do was I had to fly from Copenhagen to a capital in Europe to convince a vice president of a very big company that he should participate. It was the most horrible 2 hours of my life, professional life ever, because he just didn't want to do it. So that is obviously the wrong way. No, as I said, most people and most organizations will realize that, of course, the future is important to the organization. So the sell-in is actually easier than that. Another thing I would like to highlight is that. In my experience, it's not a problem to have different stakeholders and different voices in the room. The problem often is that the voices are not equal. So in the end, they will sit the old guy in a white shirt like me, with stars on the shoulder, going, "Yeah, but I make the decisions because I'm the CFO, or I'm the minister, or I'm the whatever." So some sort of, and I really hate the word, but safe space for these kind of discussions. I don't like it, but we need to have, at least in the explorative phases with the scanning that Sheila mentioned, we need to have an agreement that all voices need to be heard. And if the old people like me get frustrated, that is a very good sign in the beginning of this process. So how we make this, Sheila, maybe you can help me here, how to make this equal. That is difficult.
I'm going to go to Sheila, but I want to ask or add on to this for Sheila, for you to share your experience as well, because we know that in a lot of Asian societies, hierarchy is also quite a tough societal obstacle to overcome. How does that add into this conversation from your perspective?
So right, this is really a problem because I've worked with a lot of universities here in the Philippines doing foresight, and none, like zero, none of these groups ever had a student regent join the process. And I always ask, we always tell them, have a student representative to join. Have a student representative to join. Why? Because the university exists for the student. They are a key stakeholder. This is the reason for being of universities. And none. And they will say, oh, we will do a consultation with them, or we will do. No. And this is, I think, very, very cultural. So I would say to our young leaders here, like really try to get yourself in the room. No, try to, because sometimes you really have to claim it. Because the leaders, especially if they grew up and they have that kind of hierarchical programs, you really have to fight for it. You really have to ask and claim your space. So yeah, it's still an ongoing process. It's really difficult. I agree with that, but this is something that futurists are really working on. We are really saying foresight is actually not very useful if it's not participatory. There are a lot of blind spots. So you really have to put everybody in the room, stakeholders, and even people who do not have anything to do with your topic. Like if they are an unusual suspect, like an outsider, it would be nice to have them sit there as well, because they will have a very different perspective, like Carson mentioned a while ago.
Mm. Thank you, Sheila. Carsten, did you want to add anything else here?
Yeah, just a stupid little trick is actually when I'm fully agreeing with Sheila. It's crazy. Why wouldn't you have a student there? I mean, I simply don't get it. But if they are in the room, still it can be difficult. Of course, I've had students in rooms in actual commercial foresight processes where the student didn't dare to speak up because still you had the professors, you had the CEOs and the ministers and all of that. So a stupid, simple trick is to do silent brainstorms. Lots and lots of silent brainstorms, and then you just force everybody. I mean, you have to come up with 10 ideas for each megatrend or implication, whatever. And we need to. It's post-it notes, and it's super standard. It works like a charm because then everybody speaks.
Mm.
You cannot hide.
It's a very good tool to think about. I'm going to follow up with a question from Shami Gloria, who says, "What's the best way to avoid groupthink in such sessions like this?" Following on from these conversations on hierarchy, if you get people who are constantly agreeing with each other, you've said the silent brainstorming strategy, Carsten. But are there any other tips for avoiding this?
I would say map your stakeholder landscape, obviously. Sheila, you mentioned the university programs. Simply mapping stakeholder landscape. I mean, we're not out to just invite everybody into a foresight process. That would be ridiculous. But mapping stakeholder landscapes, looking for, say when I work for the AFRIA, I work a lot for IKEA. So there will be an IKEA story here. So when we work with foresight within the IKEA organization, Home Furnishing, and we work with supply chain, obviously we need to make sure that all levels of suppliers are in the room where we have these conversations. So you will have suppliers to IKEA that are very big, very global companies, and you will have small scale farmers in say South Asia for textiles or whatever, and you need to have all voices in the room. And then Sheila, I'm not sure how you do this, but sometimes I'm reflecting. Can you sort of designate roles to people before you go into the workshop? I never do that, but maybe if the three of us were doing a workshop, we could say, Freya, okay, you're supposed to be the aggressive one, and Sheila, you are supposed to. I've never done it, but sometimes I'm thinking about that.
Never done it, but really a good idea. But I think one of the things that I try to tell people when we are sort of going into groupthink, when I see like everyone is thinking the same, the question is, what does the 10th person think? So the 10th person is the one who is usually not speaking and usually like on a contrarian side like that. it's really useful to look at a different perspective. In the Philippines, we have the concept of contrapelo. This is a person who's always like adversarial, like what, like, you know, like they are the devil's advocate. And this contrapelo could really give us a different perspective. Reframing is very useful in foresight, and it's difficult to reframe when everybody thinks the same. So look for that person, look for the person who has a different perspective, give them space, and listen to them, and we might get something really, really useful. And of course, it really has to be participatory. Who are the stakeholders? We should really, and you know, when we are designing these workshops, we are telling them, take in as many representatives of different stakeholders as possible. And when they arrive, it's still the same people. But we just continue articulating this need to have different perspectives in the room. Because Sohail and Ayatullah, one of the foremost futurists, is always asking, who is not in the room, no? Whose perspectives are not being listened to and whose voices are not being heard. And Carson mentioned a while ago about Pact for the Future. And they are thinking of creating a futures ambassador and avatar, somebody who will represent the future generations. There is also the concept of an empty chair, you know, for example, for animals, for the environment, rivers, future generations. That empty chair, what are they saying in the issues that we're talking about? It's also great to listen to those voices who are not able to articulate.
Yeah, I see a question from Aksa from Pakistan, who's following this discussion, and said, what's a way to, knowing that there is always going to be a difficulty bringing in marginalized sectors into these conversations, or bringing those who they don't feel like they can compete with the loudest voice in the room. Are there any tips to get these voices in, get the people that, I mean, we've talked about a couple of different tools once they're in the room, but to even get them there in the first place, is there a way that you can, I guess, ensure they feel that they can be part of such a participatory process?
Yeah, I guess besides what we just talked about, and I fully agree about the empty chair and the 10%. And if it is not possible to get these marginalized voices into the workshops, because it's often workshops, then a simple thing is to just do interviews. It could also be quant surveys, but just reaching out, doing an interview, half an hour, and then at least I, as a facilitator, has the perspective, so I can bring that to the table. But adding on to that, I think to sort of broaden the topic a little bit. That is one of the key dilemmas in all our countries, that when we on a societal level have conversations about the future, it is always the same voices, and we have different political systems and cultures and all of that, but it is, I would imagine, in most of our countries, it's the same voices all the time. And then to be actually the devil's advocate a little bit, maybe lots of people in our societies, and I don't like to say this, but maybe they just don't care about the future. They just don't care. The future will be the same as today, and today is the same as yesterday. And if that is the perspective, and I don't have data on this, but I suspect it could be the case. Obviously, it's really an uphill battle. So a little bit
Perhaps
sad.
it's I don't know whether it's necessarily that they don't care, but we've had some discussions in the past couple of sessions also about those that don't feel like they have time to think, because
Yes, yeah,
they also have, there's just
totally.
so many other priorities in their lives, and if they're having to live day by day, it's do they
Exactly.
even, it's impossible for them to even think so far ahead, I think. Yeah. Sheila, do you have any thoughts on this?
Actually, there are so many barriers into putting everyone on the table, no? The barrier of time, the barrier of language, because usually these workshops are in English. the barriers of culture. For example, if a person is wearing G-string, will they enter a space wherein people are wearing suit and tie? You know, there are so many barriers. So we have to start breaking these barriers, and pushing, pushing the boundaries and breaking those glass ceilings for people to be able to take part. And unfortunately, a lot of these tools are also very Western centric. But there is an emergence now of decolonial and localized and locally sensitive foresight using local myths, folklore, storytelling, creating new narratives, using the language of the people you are actually working with in creating or envisioning the futures that they want. So it's a long process. This is the advocacy side of foresight. So there are people who call themselves foresight activists. Me, for sure, I am. And what I'm doing is to try to open these spaces and try to create like break these barriers. These are very real barriers, no? And try to see if we want to listen to an indigenous person, for example, and should we talk in English? Shouldn't we have somebody here translating for them so that they can also take part? And shouldn't we use tools that they can also easily access? Not super highly technical, but more on things that they can access because they don't have that Western centric kind of thinking. So I think and this is a challenge also for all our youth leaders here, who are, being encouraged to use foresight in their work, to really try to break down the barriers of people participation. And also not just people participation, like really break the barriers on that is keeping other voices from being heard. For example, stop being anthropocentric in your thinking when you're talking about foresight, because the futures is for the environment too. It's for the animals too. So how do we listen to these voices? So try to think of ways that they can be part of these conversations, even if they themselves cannot articulate it. Have an empty chair, whatever, an avatar, a person, a representative, to represent and embody these people and entities to be also part of the conversation.
I think that's such important advice, and the main primary cohort of ASEFYLS participants this year, after this training, they will go on back into their communities and organize multiply activities. And I was just making a note for myself to give this reminder that it's what is most suitable for your community, not what we're telling you should do, but it's you now take and adapt and look at your community to see what is the most appropriate at this stage. I'm going to transition to a new question here that I wanted to address, because talking about also the difference in communities. You've both worked with a variation of types of organizations. You work with private companies, government institutions, civil society organizations. From your experience, how does futures thinking, and I guess the choice of tools as well, how does it need to be adapted across different sectors, or does it need to be adapted across different sectors? Also, is a question. Sheila, would you like to start?
Thank you, Karsten. So for me, it would really be, because I've been working with the social development and the academe here in the Philippines. I use these tools as they are. But when I worked with people from communities, I kind of adapt the tools. For example, we can use a tool called Futures Triangle without talking about the terms that the creator Suhail Inayatullah used. We can use just terminologies that people understand. It doesn't have to be all the foresight jargon, you know. So learning the tools and understanding the tools help us be capable of adapting it into different situations and different stakeholders. So one of my colleagues who is based in New Zealand, she said that she's been working with Kiwis and Maoris on foresight. She never used the foresight jargon, but she's still able to use the entire foresight process to to engage the stakeholders. And I think that's what we need to do in foresight. Make it accessible for everyone, and really understand the tool in such a way that we can like break it, like break the rules, for example, like try to shift to transform it into something that is more useful to a certain kind of audience. And it's really the comics, for instance, from the Copenhagen Institute of Foresight, that I translated into Filipino. I think that's what we need to do. Like the tools are there, the knowledge is there, make it accessible to people. And if we use the language that people speak, that is really, really the most useful thing that we can do.
Yeah, and I'll just add just to re-emphasize this point, that language is not necessarily, I mean, like our mother tongue language, but also like the type of sector, right? Private companies use a different type of language than academia does, and the way they talk about different things. So even across sectors, there's a difference in communication style as well. Carsten, would you like to add on to this point?
Yeah, I fully agree to everything that was just said. The cartoon that Sheila mentions is, of course, one way from a CIFS perspective to try to reach new audiences. In a professional setting, I would say my experience is mainly European, North American, and Asian, and they're the tools that we have discussed today, and we saw in the diamond, they travel quite well. Of course, you need to be observant about the cultures and norms, and the language thing as well. But maybe for me, one big thing could actually be the what's it called? Whether you have a foresight process within a highly political organization, or it's more a non-political organization, could be private company, could also be an NGO, whatever have we. Because when you do the explorative, we are very explorative at CIFS, and we would like, which also was stated by ING, to also explore difficult megatrends or steep parts and scenarios. And that sometimes conflicts with politicians. Because a politician in all systems, he or she will have a vision, normative vision of the future. And the conversation gets very difficult when you reach the scenarios that truly challenge that future, because he or she has decided before she enters or he enters the process that this is the future. This is what I want to achieve. Whether it's one of the end of the political spectrum or not, it doesn't matter. So there we have to be very observant, and we have to really sort of stress the importance of also. I mean, you shouldn't change your political opinion. You can have any kind of opinion you like. That's super fine. But really urge them to also think about conflicts of interest, the different voices, creating tension or friction in relation to that normative perspective. So some of my failures, and I've had a lot, is actually within political organizations. It's a little bit tricky. Civil servants, not a problem, not at all. Works like a charm. Public companies, but when the minister's there.
I think there's an age-old dilemma or tension, or at least from my perspective, that I've always seen, which is, of course, the politics of short-termism. And when, politicians want to be voted in the next election, and they only think about the short to medium term future because they want to win votes. And trying to convince them that that long-term thinking is important is often very, very tricky. And I think that's what we've seen, of course, with, I mean, many issues, but especially, for example, climate change. Politicians don't really want to deal with it because you're not going to see the impacts in their cycle, in their tenure as politicians. So I think that's a really tough dilemma to sit and try and persuade them that it's important. We're starting to approach the end of today's session, so I want to sort of start wrapping up, but I want to ask both of you to share what would be your ultimate takeaways or advice for our young leaders in the room today. What are the key couple of messages, or if out of all the things that have been said, what are the key things you want everyone to take away from today? Either one of you like to go first? Sheila, perhaps.
So, for me, I think the most important thing when we're talking about foresight is you might think that you're not a futurist, but this is really a necessary skill. We have to be a futurist by practice, not by title, not by role, As a leader, this is really needed. And how do we do that? We have to practice foresight, which means like using the tools on our own, even on our own. We don't even have to facilitate an entire workshop to do this. That is a different role. That is a facilitator's role. But practicing foresight is knowing what's going on around the issues that you're, engaged with. Trying to imagine what might the futures be, and trying to help your constituents or your communities create that preferred future vision, that long-term vision. That's what we use our leadership for in foresight. And it's a huge job as a leader to engage people and use foresight and use different tools and help them think differently. But I think it really pays. It's really useful, and it really pays. It pays in the way that we create that collective vision. It pays that we have a path that we are working on together towards that preferred futures, and it pays that we have different perspectives, and we are ready, and we are adaptable and resilient and proactive. So all of this investment in trying to nurture these skills in ourselves will pay off as a leader in any sector you're working on, in any issue you're working on. It will be very useful. So I encourage you all to be foresight practitioners in your job, in your school, in your personal life, and this will pay in all of those ways.
Thank you, Sheila. Carsten, before we go to you, I wanted to add a couple of things. One is that, of course, in our ASEF Young Leaders Summit framework, actually, one of the key frameworks that we work with is self-leadership, team leadership, societal leadership. And that self-leadership, it's in itself is so important to, as you as an individual, what are you sitting with? How are you leading for yourself and with your own skills? And secondly, not to give us at ASEF too much credit, but we ourselves, we were thinking, what is it that young people need at the moment? What are we hearing from young people about the future and the skills that they need or are lacking? And that's why we picked the topic for this program, because we in ourselves observed and did our own sort of horizon scanning of what are the missing gaps in the leadership development of young people nowadays, and so almost like slightly meta for us to then be translating that into a program on futures thinking. But it's only just really occurred to me myself that that's a very basic way that you and us and we can all use and observe to be able to turn into the work that we do in our everyday lives. Carsten, would you like to share your final thoughts?
Yeah, and fully agree with both comments, of course. One thing for me also is building on what Sheila said, especially for you representing larger organizations. Maybe you have some people working with foresight already, but I don't think that will be enough in the future. I've just been doing some sessions for UNDP, and they have great futurists in our foresight people in UNDP. But the message is actually from UNDP to all its employees globally that you need to have this anticipatory skill set as well. Because I mean, I think they have, as I remember, two futurists sitting, one in Asia and one in the US somewhere, and they can't cover everything. The future is for every team, and not every day necessarily. So I do think that this will be a skill set, and then I cannot emphasize enough this ability and this courage to discuss uncertainties and things where we don't have the answer. And I would imagine all of us agrees to this now on this call. It's so easy to just say, yes, 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 we know. We all know also in real life it is super, super difficult. But entering that space and that kind of discussion, I think is probably the key message. And then we all need to be futurists. So that's why we have the program here. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Carsten. And thank you, Sheila, both of you. This has been, I think, such a wonderful, wonderful dialogue. And thank you, everyone, to all of your questions as well. Unfortunately, we do have to start wrapping up. I'm just going to pop up my slides again. Just to very initially close today's session and thank again our speakers for such a wonderful dialogue. I think it's been really, really lovely to hear both the tools and the leadership mindsets that need to go with them, because I think that's a really crucial part of thinking about them, especially when they can be so abstract. But what does it mean to actually be leading and using those tools as leaders? So thank you both, Carsten and Sheila, so much for your contributions today. With that, I will wrap up. I hope, or we will hope, that we will see you next week for our next session, which will focus more on future thinking application. We'll hear from some practitioners who have been working in lots of different contexts on how they've applied and worked with different organizations to apply futures thinking. On the screen, you can see the QR code to sign up for this next session, as well as the subsequent ones, as well as the recordings from all the past sessions that have taken place as well. With that, thank you all so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure, and we hope to see you all again next week. Thank you again, Carsten and Sheila, and thank you all, our youth leaders, for joining us today.